All right. Well, welcome to Law Talk Friday. My name is William Ott. I am a staff attorney with Lone Star Legal Aid with the Justice for Crime Survivors Project. Today, I have joining me Miss Shelley Egger with the Texas Legal Services Center. She's a managing attorney over there for the Legal Aid for Survivors of Sexual Assault Project. I also have Miss Kendra Jackson Nash with the Our Lady of Angels Maternity Shelter. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
Now, real quick, we got our disclaimer here to read into the record. This presentation is intended to serve, or is not intended to serve as legal information, or is intended to serve as legal information and does not replace legal advice. If you are looking for legal advice or legal services, please contact Lone Star Legal Aid. You can reach us at 1-800-733-8394, or you can go to www.lonestarlegal.org for more information on legal assistance. Lone Star Legal Aid does not discriminate on the basis of race, color, religion, gender expression, sexual orientation, age, national origin, ancestry, disability, marital status, or military status in any of its activities or operations. Additionally, you will also get some more information from our presenters here on how to apply for their services as well. Today, I want our conversation to focus around the idea of domestic violence survivors and leaving that abusive relationship. That can be a very dangerous and difficult time. But before we kind of sink into that conversation, I'd like y'all, Ms. Egger and Ms. Jackson Nash, to share a little bit more about your organizations. So Ms. Egger, if you could tell us a little bit more about TLSC.
Sure. Well, TLSC is one of 9 network partners that are part of the LAWSA network, the Legal Alliance for Survivors of Sexual Assault Network. And that network is funded by the Texas Access to Justice Foundation with money that was designated specifically to support survivors of sexual assault and sexual abuse throughout Texas. So we, as a network, all of the agencies provide civil legal services to survivors in a variety of areas: housing, family law, immigration, employment. Any legal issue that stems from a sexual assault is something that you can get advice on from the hotline. So when a survivor calls the hotline, they're going to talk to an attorney, which is, I think, it surprises a lot of people that they actually get an attorney on the hotline to answer the call. I think that's something that's unique. Most of the time it's going to be, an intake specialist, but here at the LAWSA hotline, it is an attorney who answers. And we're going to do an intake and see if the person qualifies for free legal services based on income guidelines and other guidelines that are set forth by our funders. And then at the very least, what they're going to get is the opportunity to talk through their legal issues with that attorney and get some advice, get pointed in the right direction if that's what they need. But for some survivors who need more extensive services, we're going to refer them to one of our network partners so that they can get either direct representation on a protective order or in a divorce or criminal justice advocacy to go with them to their criminal hearings if there is a criminal case that has stemmed from that sexual assault. So that is what happens when someone calls the LAWSA hotline.
Great. And Ms. Jackson Nash, could you tell us a little bit about Our Lady of Angels?
So Our Lady of Angels Maternity Home was founded in 1999. It operates as a 24-hour a day, 365 days a year at free of cost to residents. Our overall goal is to provide an emergency housing and wraparound services for pregnant women 18 and up. who is in crisis. So what does that look like? So starting with the emergency services, they're able to come into our emergency shelter. We're providing housing to them. They're also their children. Very evidence-based pregnancy and parenting education. We even also do LPC with mental health that is trauma informed, providing them job trainings, life skills, nutritional education, financial literacy, as well as navigating them through the community resources as far as the benefits application, transportation, education, and even potentially connecting them with the workforce solution and providing them with an internship. As of 2018, we extended our services to becoming aftercare. And with aftercare, it's providing additional evidence-based pregnancy and parenting education, additional case management while they're in independent living, life skills, and also material assistance, which connecting them to diapers, wipes, formula, because we also understand that they're leaving a place of crisis and going into a place of independent living. We want to be able to still offer services so they're not in a result back to their old ways, but be able to be a resource, connecting them to their families and other community resources in higher education. And as well as our biggest contribution is also just being there for the community and that community outreach by offering not only just anyone that's been in our program, but anyone in the community that is in need of diapers, wipes, toiletries for mom or child, furniture, and then even offering additional education courses as far as fetal development, nutrition, baby milestones, and postpartum in itself. And as of today, we have, with that program, we've serviced over 14,000 families through 14,000 families, including in the 2020 pandemic, we serviced over 700 families. So it's a project that we are proud of. We are not only able to help our clients that's in our program, but also help the community as well to meet the need.
That's amazing. And you guys are based in Temple, correct?
Correct. We are based in Temple, but our source or our reach is as far as Austin, all the way is down to Waco.
That's amazing. You guys have done some really great work. I've worked with you guys in the past. In fact, I've been over to y'all's facility and saw some adorable babies over there while I was there. You guys are doing great work. Now, Ms. Egger, I did want to ask really quickly, and this is sort of one of the things that's a little bit unique about TLSC, which is similar to Our Lady of Angels. Lone Star Legal Aid is regionally based. We service, counties usually sort of in the east, a little bit of the south, and sort of on the coast and East Texas. Reaching over to Central, I think our furthest west office is Belton. But TLSC, correct me if I'm wrong, is statewide, right?
Correct. We are statewide.
And so you'll take cases and give advice to anybody who is in the state of Texas.
That's right.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about the intersection of all three of our organizations here. But before we dive into this, we are going to be talking a lot about domestic violence. I think it's an important thing to just hang a bell on here right at the beginning of our conversation. We will oftentimes be using female pronouns to refer to survivors of domestic violence and male pronouns to refer to the perpetrators of domestic violence. However, survivors of domestic violence can be and are any gender, and domestic violence can occur in any kind of relationship. So the use of these particular pronouns should not be construed as exclusionary in any way. It just happens to be that the statistics bear out that women are oftentimes in these situations. And so I, speaking from experience, I can tell you that much more of my client base, when I'm working with a survivor, very often they tend to be female, and very often the perpetrator of the violence tends to be male. Now, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, leaving an abuser is the most dangerous time for a survivor of intimate partner violence. A 2000 study from the National Institute of Justice found that from interviews with men who had killed their partners, that the threat of separation or actual separation was most often the precipitating event that led to the murder. So given this fact, what professional advice would you offer a survivor who is considering leaving an abusive relationship? Miss Jackson Nash, let's start with you.
So the advice what I would offer would be to reassure them that they're not alone. They have many resources that's willing to help navigate and build a safety plan, so they're able to kind of think through and kind of plan their exit versus abruptly and causing a more intense as far as leading to the partner wanting to cause harm to the survivor. So basically reassuring them that there are resources that they can reach out to kind of help them navigate their exit plan and how to exit the plan effectively so there's no harm brought onto them or their children.
And Ms. Egger, I know that one of the, and you sort of mentioned it a little, I think before, well, I guess maybe in the context of criminal justice advocacy, but I know one of the services that TLSC offers is safety planning. But the same question to you, what advice would you offer somebody who's in this situation, given your experience and given the services that TLSC provides?
Sure. It's definitely something that we bring up on every single call to see what the safety concerns are that are specific to the fact situation. I think that's the most important advice, is to talk through someone who knows about safety planning and lethality assessment, and how those two things are very similar but different. There is a difference between a likelihood of future relationship abuse and a likelihood of lethality. And those sometimes the things that we're looking for in terms of how we plan for that look a little bit different. So I think talking through your situation with someone who knows the questions to ask, because it doesn't always come to mind when you're thinking about leaving. Are there firearms in the home? Where are they kept? Are they loaded? Are they easily accessible? Is there somewhere else they could be instead if you're getting ready to leave? And how to plan for all of those things and think through them. And throughout a case, before I came to TLSC, I worked at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid for 12 years, where I did extended representation for divorces, protective orders, custody cases. And safety planning throughout that case is something that has to be done on an ongoing basis. Anytime the situation changes, if there's a hearing that's coming up, how do we safety plan for court? How do we make sure that a survivor isn't going to be left alone in the courthouse, standing outside the courtroom waiting by themselves? Sometimes it has to get really specific if there are specific threats that you're concerned about. How do we make sure that we get someone to drop her off right at the door, so that she's not walking up to the courthouse if we have, major concerns in a particular case. So just working with someone who can help you think about that on an ongoing basis and how it needs to be adjusted based on how things change. I think that survivors are really intuitive, and they know when something is different. And so having a professional that you can come back to talk about it, like this happened and it has me really freaked out. Those things are important, and you can't underestimate your own intuition about what is safe or what is not for yourself. So being able to talk openly about that with someone who can help you think about strategies and making sure that your technology is safe, that you're looking at the whole of your life, and how can you try to step up that safety at all of those different avenues is really important.
Yeah, I echo everything you just said. For my part, there have been, several, and I'm sure you've experienced this with your work over at Texas Rio Grande. We would have and continue to have cases that will come in for intake, and we will learn that our survivor is still cohabitating, still living in the same home as their abuser. And oftentimes when they're applying for services, that becomes a primary safety concern for us, because we're worried about what is this going to change if we were to file for divorce and that that abuser were to be served with that divorce petition while our survivor is still living in the home? What safety concerns will that bring up? And just like you said, I've had the same the same situations where we've had to arrange for bailiffs to walk my clients to their car after a hearing because we were concerned that there might be some sort of attack or anything like that. I've had and one of the more difficult things that I think a survivor can deal with is being put in a situation where they're going to be walking into a courtroom to face their abuser. I mean, I just had a case not too long ago where my client was telling me that she was terrified of seeing her abuser again. She did not want to be left in the hallway with him. She did not want to be, she didn't even want to be in the courtroom with him, except for the fact that, that was the way that we had to move forward. And so safety planning, I think, is one of the best ways of trying to ameliorate this. And I know I have recommended to my clients in the past that if you do not, if he is not going to leave and you do not feel like you can create a safe place where, he's going to go and you can secure yourself in your home, one of the places that you can go is a shelter. And I know that is not oftentimes my clients hear that and they go, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. That's going to be, I don't know where I am on that. I wondered, Ms. Jackson Nash, if you can kind of jump in here and talk a little bit about what it is like, and maybe reassure people, what is it like to use this as a transitional space to getting to somewhere safe?
So 9 times out of 10, when you have someone that's entering into shelter and coming from a situation, when they're entering into our services, they're breaking that cycle of crisis. So our overall goal is to make sure that we're meeting their basic needs wholeheartedly, not just their physical needs, but their mental needs. So one of the things that we try to work with, we do assessing that first 72 hours. We're doing check-ins. We're making sure that they have all of their needs. So if they only come with a toothbrush and toothpaste, we're meeting those needs by providing those extra things. So it's alleviating some of the stress of, I got to have this before I come or make that step. We're saying all you need is yourself in that first step of saying, I want to get out. And so wanting to get out, we're there to meet them, we're there to meet them halfway. And so meeting those basic needs and providing them and surrounding them with community resources that they can trust. Because 9 times out of 10, a person who is coming from some type of trauma or some type of violence, they have lost trust in a lot of the community resources. So it's building that trust and also showing them that they have a support system and an advocate that's going to speak for them. So it's giving them the opportunity of building those relationships and showing them that they can trust and they have someone there. So wholeheartedly, we're meeting those needs, but then also we're attacking the mental health part of it. A lot of people think that when you speak of mental health, it's more of that negative notion, but our overall goal is for them to understand that you can have a healthy mental health. You can be in a process to where you're able to express your boundaries, know your worth and your value, and not allowing someone to dictate those feelings that you had prior to coming into the shelter. So our overall goal is just meeting those needs and meeting our clients where they come, whether it's, coming in with nothing or coming in with everything. We've seen a lot of clients that come in from domestic violence, from human trafficking in their situation. And we've seen mothers that come in that's being divorced and fleeing from a divorce situation, from a different country. So we meet them where they are, but we're definitely creating a service plan to make sure we're meeting those needs. So when they are exiting our program and entering into aftercare, they're able to sustain an independent living.
And one of the things I'll just say, and I know is a stressor for many people who are in this situation, is when they have children with their abuser. Mm-hmm. And what am I going to do with my kids? And a lot of times this is the point of conflict, or can be a strong point of conflict, where the abuser will feel like mom is running away with the children or taking the children away from the abuser. And then the survivor then also having the anxiety of saying, well, I'm going to have to take my child to an unfamiliar environment, put them, they're not going to understand why we're here in this new place, sleeping in this new bed. One of the things that I think you guys, from looking at your facility and being in there, do amazingly is really, create an environment where children are at least as much of a focus as the survivor, if not more so.
Absolutely.
But I don't know if you have anything sort of more to say about the custody or the child issue here, and maybe alleviating some of those concerns that somebody in this situation out there who may be listening to us might feel about bringing their child to a place like Our Lady of Angels.
So our environment is designed to make you feel as if you are at home. So the young ladies are brought, when they're coming in, they are welcomed with their own room. They're welcome with, not just like, it's very colorful, it's very bright. Each room is decorated different colors, of vibrant colors, just to kind of bring in the mood. But then also it's a community living. They're able to cook, clean so if a mother is used to cooking for their family, or they having that family interaction of cooking meals together, the mother is able to do that. There is that opportunity for them to learn from our clinician on how to do child play therapy, on how to interact with their child, how to navigate conversations about the trauma that their child have experienced, and how do you navigate those things with them. So we have that where the parents are able to do that with their children, and that program has floored because the parents are able to see if a child has come in and seen some type of violence and unable to speak or unable to voice how they feel. We're watching that transformation of them being able to say different words, or the parent is noticing like, my child is able to tell me how they feel versus feeling like they have to bottle it up because mom is going through what she's going through. So we've seen a transformation through that. We're able to alleviate some of the stress of, if I'm going to hotel, friend's house to friend's house, we're able to alleviate the cost of, we're going to help you take care of your child. We're going to make sure that their basic needs are met. We're going to help you with those transportations of getting to their medical appointments and things in that sense. So it's just being that other parent and assisting with the mother of getting back on their feet and providing a home-like environment for their child.
Now, I think sort of that goes right along with this is, survivors who are now new to the situation, one of the first things they're going to start thinking about once they're out of this environment is, how am I going to control this situation? And, a lot of times that's where, people start thinking of lawyers. Well, I need to get in front of a judge. I need to start talking to a lawyer. Does Ms. Egger, does TLSC offer, advice on custody issues like that?
Certainly. And I think that, that's for every survivor who is a parent, that is the top of mind concern. I would say that, often when we look at the research about why some survivors will return to their abuser or not, we talk about things like finances and housing, and those things are important. But what I have seen most often as a legal professional is that the children are frequently a reason to return, because survivors are put in this position of, if I'm there, at least I can be protective, and they are. Unquestionably, they are being as protective as they can in that situation and managing things to the best of their ability. So then when they are not, and they have taken those steps to leave, often what happens first is that the abuser will ask for, visitation. And what we still see time and again is that courts are not making that connection between the abuse that may have just been directed at the mother. They are not making that connection about how that overlaps with that abuser's skills as a parent. And so then we're put in a position where, for the first time, maybe a survivor is having to send them to the other parent's house for a weekend. And that is incredibly traumatic for everyone involved. So, managing, that's a part of the initial safety plan, is figuring out what that is going to look like, and how are we going to try to minimize, the harm that could come from that, and trying to provide reassurance strategies that, can help with stress during the time when the children are gone. And, what are some things that we could put in place to make this feel safer for everyone? And like having exchanges take place at a neutral location, in public, or having them be supervised, having the visitation be supervised. But I would say that more than anything, that piece of what is going to happen in regards to custody is something that really can send a survivor back into that situation, because it's just too much. She doesn't want to have to deal with, the consequences that are going to come from that. And it would be easier just to stay. So we're always looking for ways to alleviate that issue and make it so that is never a reason why someone would have to stay in that situation. And, a lot of that comes back to just talking about things like this, so that judges are more aware of those things before we ever get into that courtroom setting.
And one of the things I think this is especially unique about TLSC is, just like you said at the beginning of this conversation, is that, you can call the LAHSA hotline and you can speak to an attorney, that day when you get, maybe you'll leave a message, but somebody will be calling you back and an attorney will be calling you back. You get to talk to an attorney. And I think that is probably one of the things that I have heard the most is, am I going to get in trouble because I've taken my child away from their father? He's telling me he's going to call the police and tell them that I'm kidnapping my own child. Is that something that can happen? These kinds of things, just being able to talk to an attorney and get the reassurance about what is or what is not legal, what is the process, what are the steps here. I think that's really one of the best things about TLSC. Now, just like Lone Star, we have certain criteria for our client base. So, we can, certain people, for instance, I can only accept cases in which the client has been a survivor of some sort of crime. I know for the LAHSA line that there has to have been some sort of sexual assault, whether that is of a dependent or of the survivor themselves. But in a marriage or in a intimate partner relationship, can sexual assault still occur? I think that's a question that is probably on the minds of a lot of people is, am I eligible to call this even if it was my boyfriend or my husband who did this to me?
Certainly. And I think that's one of the most overlooked areas of, we already know that sexual assault is the least likely to be reported, of these types of crimes. But sexual assault that occurs in a relationship, I think is even, takes that even to the next degree, where there is so little reporting of that because there's almost so little recognition of it. Often in working with, before, when I've worked with survivors of domestic violence, talking through the situation with them and just asking, did this ever happen? Did this ever happen? I was always just struck by how frequently we would have that conversation about, was there ever, were you forced to have sex against your will? And, then the stories would just come pouring out after that. And it is just incredible how often that is happening, and the overlap between that and domestic violence, and how often sexual coercion and sexual assault are used as a part of that power and control dynamic that reinforces domestic violence. So definitely, if there is a sexual assault or sexual abuse that has occurred within a relationship context, it is still a crime. And that is something that you definitely can reach out to the LAHSA hotline for to talk about.
Well, we've been talking for about a half an hour now already, but I change gears a little bit here, sort of still kind of talking along the same lines here, but it is Mental Health Awareness Month. I feel like it would be remiss of us not to address mental health. Ms. Jackson-Nash, I know you've already talked a lot about how OLAMs will, wrap around a client and assist, every need, including mental health needs. But I think that, the statistics on this are pretty staggering. I think I was just looking up 2012 study, and again, this is 10 years old. I'm sure the numbers are different and probably greater than when the study was released by Health and Human Services. But that study found that 51 to 75% of women who are survivors of intimate partner violence experienced post-traumatic stress disorders, and 35 to 70% of women experienced some form of depression. And that's compared to just 12% in the general population. So it is 100% more likely that if you have been the survivor, if you have experienced intimate partner violence, you're going to be having some sort of mental health effect from that. I kind of want to talk to you guys both about what your organizations, think about this issue, and just what your advice might be, or how to handle how you handle these. I guess Ms. Jackson Nash, can you kind of talk a little bit about your experience with patients who may be experiencing these conditions as they come into OLAPs?
So within our assessment, as I mentioned, that 72-hour assessments, we kind of just get their history and then also their current state of mind. In that process, our wraparound program, which is our care coordination team that includes our clinician, we are assessing and trying to see what needs need to be met as far as mental health. And in that process, they're meeting with her at least once a day, but if not once a day, it's maybe like 2 or 3 times out of the week. They're able to meet and connect with her and even call if they're in the midst of a crisis. And then if we're seeing fit that we need to reach out to a community partner, we're able to do that and able to refer them out. But then in that process, we are also doing things that not necessarily have to be in like a clinical set or a counseling set. Like today, the girls did yoga. And so just kind of introducing the different ways of kind of how to take control of your mental health and take control of yourself. So just doing and integrating different forms in that sense of just doing yoga or having different community partners come in and speak about their services and providing tips and strategies on how to adjust due to the fact that we are a maternity shelter and we see a lot of our clientele is women who are pregnant, whether they're first, second, or third trimester. We're meeting the needs when it comes to mental health because we may have some that are first-time parents. And then we have some who are in their later part of their trimester about to give birth, and the new normalcy of being by yourself without your partner, without having your child's father, especially if there are the abusers. How do they adjust? How do they integrate that? So we're talking through that, building safety plans and service plans around that when it comes to the mental health.
My own part, I can say as a first-time parent, I can absolutely attest to the fact that it requires a lot of mental fortitude. I can't even imagine trying to do this on my own without the support of a partner. And so, having people like, your organization stepping in, I've got to be a godsend. But I guess, Ms. Egger, I'm sure that TLSC experiences its, fair share of people who are calling in who have experienced or are experiencing a mental health crisis because of the abuse that's occurred to them. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. I think here at TLSC, we see that not only on the LAHSA hotline, but on multiple teams that we have. And because we deal with multiple issues, we help veterans, we help people with homelessness, with public benefits, with a whole range of legal issues that are related to really the most stressful things that we can imagine happening in life, and sometimes they're happening all at the same time or in conjunction with other things that are going on. So it definitely is one area where I feel like law school totally misses the boat. Doesn't prepare us all for this. I think I heard the word trauma in one class, which was my domestic violence and the law class. And, having done the clinic at UT Law with Gina Lungwitz was, amazing for me. But without that, I would have had no idea what I was walking into. Even, as a practitioner, I was licensed in 2005. So, I've been doing this since then. And I still get better every time I learn something new. Every time I, invest in the time to get a new skill set for how to help people process trauma, how to help myself process the secondary trauma that comes from doing this work, because it does affect you. It affects the way I deal with my own children. It affects the way I deal with my partner at home. Because some days, like, I'm just done by the time I get done with work. And so, all of those things are critical, but aren't necessarily part of the toolkit that comes with our law degree. So you really have to. We as professionals have to invest the time in making sure that we do gain those skills, and as a profession we have to constantly look at how are we enabling the people that we're asking to do this work. Are we giving them the space and the time and the resources to deal with these things, or are we not? I know that for myself, when I learned about ACEs science, adverse childhood experiences, that was a game changer for me. And I mean, I will admit that, and I've said that for years. I did a training. It was a one-day training about adverse childhood experiences, and just learning how the constant stress of being exposed to conflict can rewire the brain. It really changed everything about the way I practiced. It helped me to rethink all of the things that were frustrating about my job, like having to repeat myself about certain things, or having a client where I felt like, why am I getting pushback on this? When it's just something that, like, we've got to do because the court says so, but understanding how the trauma came into play there was magical for me, I think, in terms of changing my work. And so I feel like getting those skills as an individual is important, but then also on that larger scale, just making sure that we're constantly talking about that and talking about mental health effects as a product of domestic violence and sexual assault, and not as something that survivors already had these issues and that's what made them, be victimized like that. We've got to help change that whole narrative around that, and keep talking about the fact that there is a huge need, that's an enormous gap between the need for mental health services and availability. Texas ranks second to last in the country in terms of capacity of behavioral health practitioners. Only
Goodness.
Alabama is ranked lower. And that's only about capacity and not even getting to accessibility or affordability. So that's just talking about how many there are. And I think that that's something that is completely overlooked by a whole lot of the system that we work in. I see judges over and over, like, chastise survivors for not having their kids in counseling. And I'm thinking, where are these magical free counselors that you know about? Because I don't, so just normalizing that conversation and talking about the needs and the gap in services there, I think is critical.
I could not have put it better myself. I think that was a fantastically well put. I can tell you, I just got exposed to ACEs myself just recently, and golly, what a eye opener it absolutely was.
Really?
And it did put into context, working with survivors, right when I started this, you're absolutely right. I had no understanding of what constant abuse and trauma, not even constant, just abuse and trauma in your life, what that can do to the way you think and the way you process and the way you deal with reality. And so often I would find myself getting frustrated. And it's only as I've been practicing for longer with this community that I've really come to understand, this is, something that, you just have to understand about people who have gone through these traumatic experiences. And lawyers take a long time to understand it. Of course, we're dealing with clients, and I know judges at some point were dealing with clients, but golly, to echo you again, is it difficult? You get somebody who's come in, and I can't tell you how many times I've had to explain the cycle of violence, which I feel like I learned about back in undergrad, to a judge who said, well, why after this happened to you, why did you go back? And you go, Judge, this is now almost as old as time, the understanding this cycle. But I think you're absolutely right. lost my train of thought there a little bit, but I think those are both beautiful answers. I've now kept you guys on here now for 40 minutes. I see. I do want to kind of bring this to a close, and I really appreciate you guys for both of your time. Please, Ms. Egger, could you tell us how, if anyone wants to get in touch with TLSC, what is the way to do that?
You can call the LAHSA hotline. It is 1-844-303-7233 or 303 SAFE is how you access the LAHSA hotline. And you're going to, when it answers, you're going to get options, and it's option 1 is for the LAHSA hotline to have one of our attorneys answer the call, or if we're not available, if we're on another call, you just leave a message and one of us will call you back and walk you through that intake process.
And Ms. Jackson Nash, if there's somebody here in the Austin, Temple, Killeen, Waco area, anywhere around there, if they're looking for a safe place, what's the best way for them to talk to Our Lady of Angels about?
So they can reach Our Lady of the Angels Maternity Shelter. They can call by calling 254-742-2340. And again, it doesn't always have to be that you're looking for a place to stay. If you're needing materials assistance as well, that's a number that you can reach as well. If you're looking for additional services and you can't reach us by phone, you can reach us by email at hfreeman@olums.org. Again, it's hfreeman@olums.org, and telephone number is 254-742-2340.
Well, thank you so much, both of y'all, for coming on and talking about this. Again, I think it's a super important topic that does not get enough discussion. And I think that hopefully someone out there was listening to this and got a little bit of benefit from it. So thank you again.
Thank you.